Picture this. A warrior stands in the center of the Colosseum, wounded but alive. 70,000 spectators roar around him. His opponent lies defeated in the sand. The crowd extends their thumbs. But here's what nobody told you, that gesture? It meant the exact opposite of what you think. And that's just the beginning of everything Hollywood got wrong about gladiators. The truth is far stranger than fiction. These men weren't mindless killing machines thrown into an arena to die. They were celebrities, athletes, millionaires, and some of them, they chose this life willingly. For over a century, movies have shown us the same scene. A defeated gladiator lies in the sand. The emperor extends his thumb downward. The thumbs up? He lives. Except Rome never did it that way. Ancient sources are frustratingly vague about the actual gesture. The Latin phrase pollice verso simply means with turned thumb. But turn which way? Modern historians now believe the real signal of death was a thumb thrust outward, mimicking the motion of a sword being driven into the throat. Mercy? A hidden thumb tucked safely into a closed fist, symbolizing a sheathed blade. Everything we thought we knew came from an 1872 painting by Jean-Léon Gérôme called Pollice Verso. One artist's imagination became history in the public mind. Hollywood ran with it, and we've been getting it backwards ever since. But if we got something that basic wrong, what else don't we know? Here's where it gets really interesting. Walk into any Roman ludus, a gladiator training school, and you'd find two types of men. The slaves and criminals, yes, condemned to fight. But standing right beside them? Free men, volunteers. Romans called them auctorati. These men signed contracts, legal documents. They received signing bonuses that could feed a family for years. They traded their freedom, their legal rights, even their lives, all for a taste of fame and a shot at fortune. Why would anyone do this? In ancient Rome, social mobility was nearly impossible. A poor farmer had zero chance of dining with senators or owning a villa. But a gladiator? Win enough fights and you could buy your way into a life most Romans only dreamed of. The arena was the ultimate gamble. Your life against a chance at everything. Some volunteers were former soldiers missing the thrill of combat. Others were desperate men drowning in debt. A few were thrill seekers, the ancient equivalent of extreme athletes. They strapped on armor and picked up a sword knowing full well they might never walk out. And the truly shocking part? Some were noblemen who fought in secret, addicted to the rush, the glory, the roar of the crowd. Lions, tigers, bears. Hollywood loves showing gladiators battling exotic beasts, but that almost never happened. Those animal spectacles were a completely different show called Venations, beast hunts. Different performers, different part of the day, different purpose. The morning belonged to the bestiarii, animal fighters and hunters who specialized in killing exotic creatures imported from across the empire. Romans watched leopards tear through packs of dogs, watched elephants fight rhinoceroses, watched condemned criminals get torn apart by starving lions. It was brutal. It was shocking. But it wasn't gladiator combat. Gladiator fights happened in the afternoon. These were the main event, the premium entertainment. Putting a trained gladiator, a valuable investment who cost thousands of sesterces to train, against an unpredictable animal? That was bad business. Occasionally, yes, a disgraced gladiator might be thrown to beasts as punishment. But the legendary warriors the crowds came to see? They fought other men. The distinction mattered. Gladiators were athletes, artists of combat. The Venatio was spectacle and slaughter. The afternoon games were sport. Roman politicians understood something fundamental about power. A fed and entertained population doesn't revolt. The satirist Juvenal coined the phrase, panem et circenses, bread and circuses. Give people food and entertainment, and they won't ask difficult questions about corruption, inequality, or tyranny. Gladiatorial games weren't just entertainment. They were pressure valves, political tools. Emperors and wealthy politicians sponsored games to win public favor. Festivals could last weeks, with hundreds of gladiators fighting across multiple days. The more lavish the games, the more popular the sponsor became. When Rome conquered new territories, when legions returned victorious, when an emperor wanted to celebrate a birthday, out came the gladiators. The Colosseum could hold 50,000 people, all screaming, betting, eating, drinking, completely distracted from the fact that their votes meant nothing and their Senate was a puppet show. It worked. For centuries it worked. While the empire crumbled at its borders, while corruption hollowed out the government, while inequality reached staggering heights, Romans packed the arenas and cheered. A successful gladiator could earn more in one afternoon than a Roman soldier made in a year. Prize money, gifts from wealthy patrons, endorsement deals, yes, even in ancient Rome. Gladiators appeared on pottery, oil lamps, wall murals. Their names sold products. Their faces moved merchandise. The most famous gladiators lived in luxury between fights. Fine clothes, gourmet meals. Women and men threw themselves at these warriors. Some owned property. Some invested in businesses. A few bought their freedom and retired wealthy, opening their own training schools or living off their earnings. Consider Flamma, a Syrian gladiator who fought 34 times, won 21 victories, and was offered freedom 4 separate times. He turned it down every time. Why? Because life as a celebrated gladiator was better than anything freedom could offer a former slave. Or Spiculus, Emperor Nero's favorite, who received houses and riches equal to those of men who had celebrated triumphs. A former slave living like a general. But here's the catch, only the best made it that far. For every Flamma, dozens died in obscurity, their names forgotten, their bodies dumped in mass graves. Forget the extended sword duels you've seen in movies. Real gladiator combat lasted 10 to 15 minutes. Maybe 20 if both fighters were exceptionally skilled and evenly matched. Why so short? Because these weren't soldiers battling for survival. They were professional fighters giving a performance. A good match showcased skill, technique, bravery. The crowd wanted to see blood, yes, but they also wanted to see mastery. A quick, decisive victory or a fierce but brief exchange. Long fights were boring. Fighters got tired. They made mistakes. The crowd grew restless. Referees would separate gladiators if the action stalled, forcing them to reset and engage again. The whole event was choreographed to maintain energy and excitement. Training schools taught gladiators to make every moment count. Strike decisively. Move with purpose. Put on a show. Because that's what this was, violent theater where the actors bled real blood. Gladiators were the rock stars of ancient Rome. Women tattooed their names on their bodies. Fans collected gladiator memorabilia. Rich patrons competed to sponsor the best fighters. Graffiti found in Pompeii gushes over gladiators like teenage fan mail. One piece of graffiti reads, "Celadus the Thracian makes all the girls sigh." Another declares a gladiator, the glory of the girls, the desire of the women. Successful gladiators attracted entourages. Sponsors provided them with trainers, masseuses, doctors. Wealthy Romans invited them to parties, not as entertainment but as guests of honor. Some had harems of admirers. Others married into wealthy families after retirement. Emperor Commodus himself fought as a gladiator, obsessed with the fame and glory. He was, by all accounts, terrible, fighting disabled or drugged opponents to guarantee victory, but his obsession reveals just how intoxicating gladiatorial celebrity could be. Even an emperor craved what these fighters had, raw, unfiltered adoration from the masses. Here's something that would horrify modern athletes. Gladiators ate almost no meat. Their diet consisted primarily of barley, beans, and grains. So much barley, in fact, that they were nicknamed hordearii, barley men. What? The grain-heavy diet served a purpose. It helped fighters build bulk and develop a layer of subcutaneous fat that could protect vital organs from cuts and slashes. In a combat sport where shallow wounds were common, that protective layer could mean the difference between a superficial cut and a killing blow. Analysis of gladiator bones reveals they consumed a drink made from charred wood or bone ash, likely to provide calcium after the intense physical trauma of training and fighting. This wasn't the diet of warriors. It was the diet of human livestock, designed to keep valuable fighters alive and functional. The finest gladiators might receive better food as a reward, but the standard diet was cheap, efficient, and designed to build bodies optimized for survival, not pleasure. Hollywood shows us gladiators fighting to the death every single time. The reality was far more economical. Training a gladiator took years. It cost a fortune. Throwing away that investment in every match made no business sense. Studies of gladiator remains suggest death rates of around 10 to 20% per match. Yes, people died. But most fights ended with a surrender, missio. A defeated gladiator would drop his weapon and raise a finger, appealing for mercy. The decision belonged to whoever sponsored the games, an emperor, a senator, a wealthy magistrate. They'd read the crowd. If the loser had fought bravely, shown skill and courage, the crowd often demanded mercy, and the sponsor usually obliged. After all, these spectators might return for future games. Killing every fighter meant no returning favorites, no narratives, no rivalries. Some gladiators fought dozens of times over years-long careers. They became familiar faces. The crowd invested in their stories. Killing them unnecessarily was like a modern sports league shooting its star players after every game. But mercy wasn't guaranteed. Cowards died. Fighters who disappointed died. And sometimes the crowd simply wanted blood, and no amount of bravery could save you. The Roman Empire didn't end gladiatorial combat. Christianity did. As the empire converted, the new religion condemned the games as barbaric and immoral. But traditions die hard. Even after Emperor Constantine banned gladiatorial combat in 325 AD, fights continued unofficially for decades. The last recorded gladiator fight happened around 435 AD, over a century after the ban. By then, the Western Roman Empire was collapsing. Barbarian invasions, economic collapse. The infrastructure that supported massive public games had crumbled. The Colosseum, once the gleaming heart of Roman entertainment, fell into disrepair. Earthquakes damaged it. Thieves stripped its marble. It became a fortress, then a quarry, its stones repurposed for churches and palaces. The gladiatorial schools closed. The weapons rusted. The warriors faded into legend. But their legacy never died. Modern boxing, MMA, wrestling, we're still watching trained fighters hurt each other for entertainment. We're still making celebrities out of warriors. We're still packing arenas and betting on violence. We like to think we're more civilized than ancient Rome. We don't throw people into arenas anymore. We don't cheer for death. But turn on any screen, open any sports app, and you'll find millions of people watching controlled violence, celebrating athletes who sacrifice their bodies, betting on who will dominate and who will fall. The names change. The rules evolve. But the human appetite for combat, for watching warriors test themselves against each other, that never went away. Rome fell. The gladiators died. But the games? The games never really ended. They just learned to wear different masks.